Welcome back, freshwater fishing novices, new viewers. We're talking about what does EWG stand for? Extra wide gap hook. I'll even put a picture up here of the extra wide gap hook just so you can see it. Now, the first difference I noticed is the way that you set the hook. Now, if we're out there chucking around an extra wide gap hook, when you set the hook, you're really gonna give it some oomph. You're gonna give it a lot of power. You're gonna really set that hook and jam that hook in the fish's mouth. When you're fishing anything with a treble hook, and when you feel a fish hit it, all you're gonna do is lean in and reel down. You're gonna let the rod do more of the work as far as setting the hook. You're not gonna be jamming that treble hook. You're not gonna be trying to set it the same way. It's a much softer hook set. Those are the two main differences when you're setting the hook. Let's talk about the rod you'd be using, or you should be using. I don't know. What I think, from what I've heard, you should be using. For an extra wide gap hook, you're gonna, anywhere from a medium to heavy rod. You can get away with a medium fast action rod. So the tip is doesn't have a lot of bend in it, barely bends down the backbone at all. You're gonna want a more stout rod. In comparison with the treble hook, what you're looking for is a medium rod with a moderate action tip versus a fast action tip. And the main difference between those two, moderate action is gonna bend more down the rod blank. So what that's gonna do is the rod's actually gonna fight the fish with the treble hooks. So it's gonna give, so when the fish tries to flick the hook, the rod's gonna bend and absorb that pressure. So it's gonna keep pressure on the fish with those treble hooks. If you have a fast action rod and it barely bends at all, you're barely gonna have any give with those treble hooks, and the fish might be able to kick that treble hook. So that might be an issue. When I first started and I found an extra wide gap hook, and I realized you could rig that weedless. And that's all I wanted to fish. Forget treble hooks, I don't need those things. I'm just gonna fish weedless because there's weeds everywhere. Now, depending on your pond, if it's very weedy, you are gonna wanna stick with that extra wide gap hook. That treble hook right there, that's gonna pick up a lot of weeds, grass, schmutz, leaves on top of the water. Your hooks are gonna pick that up. Now, when would you use a treble hook? Well, in comparison, if you have open water, just draw a picture right here. This is a top-down view. So if you're in a little kayak right here and you're fishing, you don't want to throw a treble hook into those pads. Extra wide gap hook shouldn't be a problem if it's weedless. It's just getting through those pads because really it's just going to sit on top of the pad. So you're going to want some weight. So when I fish a treble hook, if I'm paralleling just the edge of those lily pads, say there's a grass field right here. You're over here somewhere. You throw your lure over here. If it's not a deep diver, say it's a crankbait, and it doesn't dive that deep, and you know the grass isn't that deep, say your crankbait dives 2 to 4 feet, and this is 4 feet below the water, you should be able to run it right over the grass, or maybe just barely tickle that grass, and hopefully a fish will come out and hit it. If the grass is, sticking out of the water and stuff like that, extra wide gap hook probably, and say there's a grass line right here. This is all grass line. I would be throwing a crank right parallel to that grass, as close as I could get without hooking up with it. So that's when I'd be throwing a treble. Open waters are good for treble hooks. Basically, treble hooks in a lot of grass or pads, no good. Extra wide gap hook's great. If you're in open water, you could do either. Okay, let's talk about the difference between boat flipping or shore flipping your fish once you catch it on the EWG or the treble hook. I'm sure you've seen videos out there. If you haven't, click on a fishing video or go watch one of my videos where I'm fishing. Using an extra wide gap hook, boat flip, not a problem. Shore flip, not a problem. As long as as long as your rod is stout enough to handle flipping the size fish you're flipping, you should be all right. I mean, if you try to flip a 10-pound bass on a medium rod, you might have some issues. You might snap your rod. So don't do that. You ruin your rod. Generally, I have no problem boat flipping fish on an extra wide gap hook. Realistically, you can boat flip both. I think I may have lost, maybe they've kicked off the treble hooks a little bit more frequently personally. But really, feel free to boat flip. Now, there's a controversy I've recently become aware of around treble hooks. The guy who was talking about it was fishing for trout, so I can see that trout are a little bit more sensitive. With trout, That's the bass. What the hell am I looking at that thing for? With a trout might bite that whole hook, and then he has 3 hooks in his mouth. And they have pretty sensitive jaws. So if you're not careful on hooking them, you can really mess up their jaw and probably cause too much trauma to the fish to where it won't survive. Problem. That's a problem. I watched this guy who makes lures, inline spinners and stuff like that, and he uses what's called a straight shank. And he went out and tested between treble hooks and straight shanks, which is right there. See the hook? It's just straight. He went out and tested it, and he said the reason he only puts straight shank hooks on his lures because it always hooks the fish in the corner of the mouth, as opposed to treble hooks where he was foul hooking fish on the side. Too many hooks in the mouth kind of messed up one of its jaws. One was bleeding like crazy. Every fish he caught on the straight shank hooks hooked in the corner of the mouth. It popped right off. He could really just shake it and the fish would come off. So if you're concerned about fish, like I am, if you're fishing for trout, I would say straight shank hooks. But for bass, because they're a lot tougher, I'd say it's probably not an issue. But if they hook it in their mouth, you're 9 times out of 10 probably good with releasing that largemouth bass on treble hooks. Trout, be a little more sensitive. The other reason you want to be careful, I'm sure I've already said this, but treble hooks are kind of dangerous. You don't want to get them in you because there's 9 hooks. Say there's 2 in the fish, that means there's 7 hooks that are exposed. Say it's hooked right here, and now he's got loose hooks down here, and he starts shaking. This hook is kicking around. So if it hooks the fish, if it comes up and hooks you, that's bad. So be careful. Be careful when you catch fish on treble hooks because, you know, they move. So you don't want those treble hooks coming around, maybe catching you in the leg and the thigh, in your knotty region. Just want to be careful with the treble hooks and the fish. I know some other anglers got into fishing again this year, and they did not like treble hooks because they were concerned about grabbing the fish. Now, what I've figured out, here's a pro tip. Say I catch a largemouth bass or a smallmouth bass on treble hooks. If I get a good grip on their lip and I grab it strong, I mean good, like it's not going to shake away. It might shake, but it's not going to pop out of my hand. You want to hold on to that fish real good to where you can get those hooks out and then let the fish go. Maybe take a picture. Okay, freshwater fishing novices, new viewers. Hopefully you learned something. Maybe it was a little bit enlightening about extra wide gap hooks, straight shank hooks, and treble hooks. If you like this video, slap that like button. If you're not subscribed, I have no idea why. It's totally free. All it does is help my channel out, help it grow, get out to other anglers who are learning, like you and I, novice anglers. If you wouldn't mind taking a second to hit that subscribe button, click the bell notification, make it turn from red to gray. You'll be notified of future fishing videos, hopefully helping you become a better angler. Also helping other anglers find my channel and hopefully help them become better anglers as well. If you have any questions, comments, anything that's bugging you about fishing, leave it down in the comments below. I respond to those comments. Thanks for watching my video this week. I hope everyone has a great weekend. Catch you next week.